Good afternoon. Welcome to Nigerian Now on Echo Television, where we look at some of the happenings currently in the country. We bring it here on the show, discuss it, and also, profile some recommendations which we feel will go a long way to possibly maybe resolve some of the issues we are having in the country. I'm Stella Elisha Bashir. You can be part of the conversation, just like we said, dropping your comment on Facebook and in YouTube. I'll be doing the program together with Rachel Tansi. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, seven.
Afternoon. All right, before we go into some of the matters that we would love to discuss, we'll let you know that the court have reinstated Shaibu as Edo Deputy Governor. We will record that there were some moves to impeach him, rather, from being the deputy governor, looking at some of the back and forth he had with the governor. But then the court have actually ruled in favor of him, so he has been reinstated as the deputy governor. As well, we are seeing that the Senate has removed Senator Ali Ndume as the chief whip and actually replaced him with Senator Manguno. So you can do well to look forward to more details as more we're having more stories, looking at these two issues which we bring to your table. Now, looking at some of the matters we would love to discuss, we'd like to look at what's happening in the health sector. We will recall following almost more than a month right now, we've been having the issue of cholera outbreak. And then we are waking up to another, revelation, the fact that yellow fever is another case again. And we're seeing that the cases keep going high and high and high. And then we will recall that when it started, we had just few states, Lagos and few others, but we're seeing that right now it's almost in 34 states. And this is really, really alarming. I mean, in the morning we saw where pharmaceutical companies, they have stopped, importing of raw, materials, and I just can't help but wonder what is going to be the fate of patients in the hospital right now, where we're seeing multinationals leaving the country, and just when we're saying, okay, let's start making something indigenous, something local here, and then we're seeing that raw materials are no longer being imported in the country. But then looking at the issue here, I recall yesterday, I think on one of the papers we saw where the cases was going down. But then this morning again, we're seeing that, the cases is going high. And I recall you saying earlier in the morning the fact that it's still the season, so that is to say we will still be recording more cases. But apart from Lagos, I've actually taken the initiative on, testing some of the water to be able to trace what is really the factor. We saw even where the government as well are trying to get in some vaccine, emergency vaccine, to be able to vaccinate some of the people so that people don't get to fall victims to that. But then the issue of all of this thing that's affecting almost all states in the nation, what really can be done about that? Because we are not health practitioners, but then I believe that some of the recommendations can go a long way to be able to resolve some of these things like cholera, yellow fever, Lassa fever, and many other things. Even though we're seeing Lagos State has even debunked the rumor that they never said they're going to reintroduce monthly sanitation. But then beyond sanitation, making sure your water, your vegetable, what more can the government do, especially in regards to our health sector that we know is failing? We don't have sufficient health practitioners on ground, and there's so many other factors that can be contributing to the issue of why we are having these cases increasing rather than decreasing.
If it is concerning what the government can do, Stella, I believe is making treatment available. That is what the government is expected to do, because you have these hospitals, you have this facility. It is your responsibility to make treatment, vaccine, medications available to patients that will be the victims of this outbreak and all of that. Because what else can I do than wash my vegetables and try to eat healthy or clean? But if I so happen that regardless of what I am able to do, I find myself with cholera, the next thing is that I am taken to the hospital for treatment. So the government now needs to make that treatment available to me and medications available to me. Also, the water supply, it is owned by the government, it is regulated and supplied by the government. What is the government doing to make sure that the water that gets to our households are clean, well purified, and all of that? So I think it's everybody playing their role, but significantly the role of the government is making sure that the hospitals are able to treat patients and people who will fall down sick as a result of cholera. I believe that it is something that, if not because of the inavailability of certain things, it can't be treated. There are vaccines for it, there are treatments for it. It shouldn't be as fatal as the number of deaths that we are recording. But for some reason, I know that people also do have the habit of seeking treatment late until it becomes worse. They try to manage it at home, and then they go to the hospital when much damage has been done and there's little or nothing our health workers can do to save that person. Those are other factors too, but for the factors of victims that were able to make it to the hospital on time, I believe it is the responsibility of the hospital to make sure that such patient's life is not lost at the end of the day. Now we can move to yellow fever and still say it is a season, because it is also a mosquito-borne disease. That is, in this season, we know this is when we have more mosquitoes. It is the raining season. There are more mosquitoes breeding and growing out there because now the weather has become much more conducive.
Of course.
This is a weather that your clean or dirty environment has nothing to do with it, as long as they have water. And we know that now water is beginning to gather in places that were dry before the rain came. So during the dry season, if you have a lot of mosquitoes, we can point fingers and say it is your environment, it is dirty. How are your gutters not clean, dried and drained, and all of that? We can point fingers. But when it comes to the rainy season, where everywhere is always damp, moist, there's little or nothing you can do about mosquitoes. They are in their large number as it is now. This is where we need to take care of that. We need to bring in mosquito net. And thankfully, we had mosquito nets being given some months back, even before now. And I know that in my house, we were able to get access to mosquitoes. In other words, we will feel like we're all grown ups and we don't need it. Now you can see that, well, we're talking about mosquitoes here. Regardless of your age, you can be down, and this can be fatal, just like malaria also. So I think that go and get a mosquito net. Insecticides now are very expensive, seller. It's one of those things that when you go, you would be shocked. Insecticides are very expensive at the moment. So, but then what about the ones that the government have been able to make available to you, such as the mosquitoes? Cut your grasses also. I know this is one of those who will say, okay, well, we can't point fingers. In the end, there's still a little pointing of fingers that we can do. Cut down your grasses and make sure that despite it being raining season, you can't control the humidity, the dampness of your environment. You can still control its cleanliness, just to give it a clear space and all of that. Make sure your doors, windows are shut before 6 p.m. because that is when they are out to invest your house and all of that. We can do a lot. But what about the vaccines? Just as you said, I mean, pharmaceuticals not importing raw materials can sound like a threat. But I also want to believe we have records showing that at least every year we have 500 cases of yellow fever. It shows that it's rare. At the same time, it means we should be prepared for it, since it's not a disease that we say we don't encounter it. We do. So it means there should be vaccines for it, because it can be solved with vaccines and treatment. So it means there should already be treatments available for it, for those that are already having symptoms, and for the preventive measures that will be taken for those who are yet to have it. There's just, everybody needs to play their role here. I just hope that when it is my own side, I have played my role, and when my own role fails and I have to go to the hospital, for example, the government won't fail, or the caregivers, the hospitals will not fail when it comes for them to play their own part of the game.
And I recall during the issue of the vaccine, or some of the concern being raised, I remember we raised it here, was the fact that the government said that the vaccine will be made available to private hospitals. And I said, how about the government hospitals? That was a concern I raised, because people have more access to the government hospital because it's more cheaper than going to the private hospital. So I hope the government will reconsider and make sure that it's not just limited to a particular health sector or just to the private, but let's see that it goes round to it, because everybody is at risk. It will shock you to know that before you even leave the country, you need to show show your yellow card as well, your yellow fever vaccine.
Yes.
So regardless, we have to take all of this seriously. You don't have to wait until you're leaving the country.
Of course.
If you can have access to be vaccinated, please do that. Now we're seeing that Labour is threatening to go on a moon strike, Rachel. I mean, they're back and forth trying to negotiate with the government. We remember the last meeting they had with the president. They will be having another one again tomorrow with the president.
Yes,
and I think that would depend on how far the negotiation will go, and then the president will submit whatever it is, their outcome of the meeting to the National Assembly. And here we're seeing that Labour is saying that if the National Assembly should push this request to, rather than being on the concurrent, some of the things they are supposed to discuss, if they have to push it, they said they will be going on a moon strike. I don't know what that means. I recorded 2 days, not even up to 2 days, just 1 day strike Labour went, and we remember where we saw a number of people coming out to say that because of their action there was no light, and then it resulted to how many billions and millions being lost, patients died because so many people just try to push some blames. But I mean, already here we're seeing that Labour is really giving the government heads up on what they hope to do. So I am hoping that it will not just be one of those threats coming from Labour and then the government will push it, but rather let the government see what can they do. I think this will give them ample time before tomorrow. I don't know what the president have in mind to discuss with them again, but then I'm hoping that after the meeting for tomorrow, Rachel, it's my desire that they will come up with something tangible, because already we're seeing that Labour is not shifting ground. 250,000 is what they are standing on. We've seen a number of people are coming out with the fact that we saw how much was being spent to build the vice president villa. We're seeing where the Senate is saying if the president needs a private jet, they will provide for him. We remember the probe concerning the yacht and all of that. So people are beginning to name things that when it comes to our leaders, we see that the country has so much money, but then when it comes to what the masses need, the government does not have money for it. And this is a really, really big concern to a number of people. And I just hope that this will not be one of those threads where we see the federal government will say they have a law or they have a court order, stopping Labour from going for such. But then we just keep our fingers crossed. But this is the threats coming from Labour concerning that.
One of the papers in the morning, Sele, used the word obnoxious, that if the federal government should pass an obnoxious minimum wage to the National Assembly, that Labour is going to go on a strike. And Sele, obnoxious will be 62,000 naira minimum wage. I believe that that is where Labour is standing, that 62,000 naira is not acceptable. It cannot be acceptable for a government that have failed to control inflation. Because what people don't understand is that inflation is the total and complete failure of the government to be able to manage its monetary and fiscal policies, because these are the two things that are solely directly the reason behind inflation. So for a government who have failed to be able to manage inflation, 62,000 naira will be something that I think common Nigerians, everybody, whether you're part of Labour or not, will stand behind this union to make sure that the federal government does something about it. Now the question is, can the government of Nigeria give 250,000 minimum wage? Yes, Sele, they can. Until they prove otherwise, until they come out with breakdowns, explanations, statistics, data that we cannot pay you 250,000. I believe this is what Labour is demanding from the federal government. Prove to us that you cannot pay 250,000 minimum wage. And just as you said, rightly said, when you look at the amount that the government is spending on procuring and doing certain things for themselves, when it comes to their own luxury, they can afford it. But when it comes to the need, say not the luxury, the need of the common Nigerian, you cannot afford it. It's really, really sad. What are we doing about our revenue generation? For the year 2024 down to 2025, is the government going to tell me that they cannot pay workers 250,000? Fine. What are you doing if your revenue is your concern and your worry? What are you doing from now to the next year to be able to boost your revenue? Because there are so many loopholes that if you're willing to cover them, we will have better revenue generation in the country as it is now, and so on and so forth. We've seen reports from Monday where OPEC is saying that our oil revenue our oil production have increased, where we went from the previous month in May of 1.25 million barrel per day. As at the month of June, we are at 1.27, an increase of over 250,000 barrels. What are we not going to do? What can the government not do? Everything, Sele, to see that our revenue increases. You talk about agriculture all the time. We saw the potential recently, as little some few gold bars, and we're able to pump in $500 million dollars. This is just a fragment, a very tiny fragment of what gold can bring into our account as a federation, and also other solid minerals that are lying and wasting and all of that are not being secured. What are you willing to do as the government of Nigeria to see that you pay above 62,000 naira when it comes to minimum wage? Are you willing to put in the work? Because that is all what Labour is asking of you, and also the entire Nigerian asking of you to do unto them, because they are deserving on it. You're not the only one who should enjoy the wealth of the country.
You know, Richard, so you're just saying it. I just keep trying to think about quite a number of things. Just like you said, I always emphasize on the fact that we have agriculture. And let's not forget, when we talk about agriculture, we're not only talking about planting. We're talking about so many other smaller sectors still in the. So forget about planting of when we're talking about cash crops. Have we thought about, okay, what can we do about maybe livestock? Have we thought about that? We still import stockfish. We still import fish. There are certain things which I can't help but wonder. I mean, what are we doing? We still import chickens. So these are quite a number of things. So just imagine if we actually give all of the smaller other sectors attention, and that we're able to export as well. I mean, we'll be getting richer and richer by the day. And so just like you said, I mean, it's quite sad that that's the situation we find ourselves. And just like I always say, Richard, if the government is willing, they would definitely find a way. But I'm not seeing a willpower coming from our leaders so far. Maybe after this show, maybe we'll begin to see will coming in, but for now I can't see any will anywhere. So I'm hoping that our government will be willing to do something for its people, because just like you said, they are deserving of it. Now we're seeing that you made mention of the fact that our revenue, how we can boost our revenue, and here we're seeing the president is actually directing the chief of defense staff to actually end oil theft, because I think it's almost getting to more than 10 years we've been going through this issue of oil theft in the country. We've seen what is happening in the Niger Delta, and I think it's one, we also saw the issue of land grabbing. We've seen a number of things that are happening there. I remember when you and I were discussing the fact that we hear certain vessels using our seaport. I just can't help but wonder, how comes we're unable to read and see? You just can't help, and then it looks as if somebody somewhere is aware of what is happening, but decided to turn a blind eye and not to record all of this. And we're seeing that they said in the next 3 months, hopefully, we'll see an end to it. And it's everybody's desire, because in as much as I keep saying we shouldn't depend so much on oil, but if this is what is fetching us so much of revenue, I think we need to give it the deserving attention that it needs, so that we'll be able to, you made mention of our cost. There was a time we're getting almost 1.5 plus barrel per day. So that is how it is. But then imagine us dropping to 1.2. There's really something wrong, where we are looking forward to having even 2 million barrels per day. So I mean, this is really something. I hope that the chief of defense staff and every other person will be able to end this issue of criminality and oil theft that is happening in the Niger Delta.
Yes, Sarah, just as you mentioned it, there was a time that we were having crude oil production getting to 1.6 million barrels per day, in as much as at that time our quota was 1.8, but we had periods of time where we were able to even exceed. There are times we got to 2 million barrels per day, and this was during the Goodluck Jonathan administration, but ever since then we just kept on seeing decline and decline, and now we are down to 1.5. OPEC has cut our quota, and despite it being 1.5, the highest we are able to go is the recent one, is 1.3, and that was at the last quarter of 2023. And so far for this year, the best so far is 1.27 million barrels per day. And then I believe that it has been the war on oil theft and bunkering. And I believe that there is more that needs to be done. There is need for more oil exploration, obviously, and we have some multinational going, and then certain oil wells due to leakage and some problems the first quarter of this year have to stop drilling and all of that because it could be hazardous and all of that. So with all of those factors in place, the oil sector is also struggling with divestment, and that's one of the things that the federal government also need to look into, investing into it. But at the same time, I believe is due to, sleeping on certain issues, because the oil sector, it's lucrative on its own, that it shouldn't even struggle with the issue of having investment. But when you do not put certain things in place and you have certain companies closing down and going and leaving, then there won't be room for exploration, there won't be room for more wells to be dug, found, and all of that. And these are all factors. And then when you're losing your guard on certain things, oil theft, bunkering, and all of that, you can, just as you say, you can't just help but wonder, how did this vessel so large move undetected? And you would know it is very deliberate. It's not theft. Well, it is theft, but it's very deliberate theft, in my opinion. The war is big, Selene. I believe. It just sends a message that I feel, you've said it countless of times, and I'm going to still emphasize it. It just sends a message that we're sleeping on our jobs because we are refusing to understand that oil has come to its peak, where it might not do us any better than what it's doing. Not because there is no oil out there, but I think it just comes to marginal utility and all of that. And it might take a time for us to get back there. But this message has been there for long, that most importantly, we should focus on diversification. And we have refused, the government of Nigeria has refused, in my opinion, to diversify. It's oil, 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 and oil is disappointing every single day. But you don't want to leave oil because you don't want to do the work. Because we are comfortable with the theft. We are comfortable with the bunkering. We are comfortable with the subsidy removal, subsidy payment left, right, center, because somebody somewhere out there indirectly and directly is benefiting from all the loopholes, from all the laxity in the oil sector. And that is why we are seeing clearly that it is doing us no good at the moment, but we are refusing, we are insisting and forcing ourselves on oil, despite oil pushing us to look at every other direction. I'm not saying there shouldn't be fight on oil bunkering or theft and all of that, but I think oil has gotten to that point where you need to refocus, re-strategize on other things. And this is where the government of Nigeria, I believe, is refusing to do anything about it, and they are sleeping. They are just nothing but sleeping, refusing to give their 100% when it comes to diversifying our revenue generation. And why will we be, Sele, a very populous country? Why would you, as the president of a country, boast of our manpower, but then your concern is on a sector that cannot even use 1/3 of the manpower you have? How does that make sense? No matter how many oil wells we have, so it cannot generate employment for half of our. It can't even do quarter. It can't do 1/3. No matter how many oil wells we have. So how does it? You are out there boasting about our manpower, but you are focused on a sector that don't have the potential. Even if all our refineries are functional, so that it will not employ 1/3 of our population because it doesn't have
the capacity to
do that by nature. So what are we trying to say? So do we now agree that the government knows clearly what to do, but are refusing to do it? Because the more we chew these issues, that's all
the
it keeps
more
revealing.
we get to discover more and more things that the government need to do. And I think another thing is the fact that the government is refusing to focus on the right enemy. Because I think that if we are asking the CDS to end it, it's more like talking about thieves that are using jerry cans and gallons, and we know that is not the those are not the thieves we're talking about. We're talking about thieves that are wearing ties. We're talking about thieves that are wearing skirts. Those are the thieves we're talking about. And uniforms. Those are the thieves we're talking about. We're not talking about the thieves that maybe will just go punch a little pipe. Vandalism. No, those are not the things we're talking about, because those ones cannot really stop us from reaching our quota. We're talking about those big cooperatives. So I hope that the government, just like we said, let us refocus. Let us sit down and think, if we are willing to think, by the way, because from the way things are, we're not ready to use, our intellect to know what we are meant to do. Well, we look forward to seeing how far the Chief of Defense Staff and other security agents will be able to stop this issue of oil theft. We look forward to seeing that before the end of this year, we should be able to see that we're beginning to get somewhere if we want to concentrate on the oil. Even though I always say that the oil wells will dry up someday. So when they dry up, what will now happen to us as a nation? So I hope that we'll think about that. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this. You're welcome, Sally. And as well, thank you to the crew and every other person that made this program a success. We look forward again to doing this tomorrow. To have a great day ahead.